morning, everybody. Good morning. And no, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is a JPR video about Mega Evolutions being published in the year 2024. As far as Pokemon gimmicks go, Megas are a little weird. Unlike Z-moves, Dynamax, and presumably Terrestrialization, when Megas were introduced, Game Freak likely meant for them to be permanent. We can see this in how they carried over to Hoenn, Alola, and even Kanto through the next handful of games. But also because they rewrote the entire lore of the Pokemon multiverse to make it so that Mega Evolution could canonically happen in any region, which in retrospect is kind of insane. And even after Megas were phased out of the core games in Gen 8, they kept appearing in spin-off material like Pokemon Masters and were featured prominently in the Pokemon Journeys anime series. Because Pokemon knows that while balancing Megas in games where other gimmicks exist would be a logistical nightmare, they at least know that Megas are insanely popular and marketable. And I acknowledge this as somebody who has made a few videos pointing out some of the flaws with Megas, which always makes people mad. I'm sorry, but just telling it like it is. So in celebration of Megas making their long-awaited return to the core series games in Legends ZA, let's go over some of the best and worst Mega Evolutions. Now, in case you're new to my best and worst videos, I don't just take competitive viability into account. I like to pull from a lot of different avenues that get people angry, including designs, innovation, integration, and does it make the Pokemon good without venturing into broken territory? Like, hey, Mawile, I'm glad you got better, but like, maybe this is a little much. So without further ado, here are my 5 best and 5 worst Mega Evolutions. Emphasis on mine. This is a personal list. It's probably going to be nothing like you'd expect it to be, but I'll try to give good reasonings. Anyway, my number 5 worst pick is Mega Alakazam. My main reason being that it's just way too similar to regular Alakazam. In fact, if you look at the stats, it looks like it's built almost exactly the same way, just with its speed and special attack cranked up to criminally high levels. It also gets Trace as an ability, and I believe I mentioned this in the Gimmicks That Make Pokemon Worse video, but like, that ability can sometimes work against you more often than it works for you. Because of that, Mega Alakazam is a relatively unreliable Mega Evolution that doesn't bring a whole lot of new material to the table. Its design is kinda bland and forgettable, like, whoa, he's got 5 spoons now, he can really mow through a tub of ice cream, watch out guys! I don't know, he almost looks less threatening than regular Alakazam, he's kinda goofy if I'm being honest. But yeah, everything from stats to design to usability, it's just more of the same, and honestly, it's barely even an improvement since it suffers from the exact same flaws as regular Alakazam. But moving on to my number 5 best pick, I am going with Mega Charizard X. This is probably the only mainstream pick that I'm going to have all day, but hear me out. Do I hate that Charizard has 2 Mega Evolutions? Yes. Do I hate the blatant favoritism that Game Freak constantly gives to this overrated fire lizard? Yes. By all accounts, this Mega shouldn't exist, or maybe why shouldn't exist, doesn't matter. Point is, there shouldn't be 2. But let me tap into my dumb, childhood brain for a second and just get hyped about the fact that we have a sick blue and black Charizard that is also part Dragon type. So people can stop posting those unfunny memes about what is and what isn't a Dragon type. Unfortunately, that didn't actually stop those memes from appearing, but it's progress. And while this Mega went a long way towards making Charizard actually good, it's far from broken in any capacity. It also reinvents Charizard in this cool mixed attacker way, while Y pretty much only uses special attacks. I know Y is better competitively speaking, and if I'm being completely honest, Y has way cooler looking wings, just look at those things, those go hard! But X has the coolness factor, it's what Elon Musk wanted Twitter to be. Even if it is blatant fan service, I also find him way more fun to use in both a main story and competitive context, so it gets my vote. My number 4 worst pick, and I'm fully prepared to catch flack for this, but it's Mega Garchomp. Once again, like Mega Alakazam, this thing looks way more goofy than threatening. Bro's got the crimson chin sticking out and wants you to take him seriously. I don't think so. The rest of the design doesn't do it for me either. The scythe hands look more inconvenient than anything, like he devolved, honestly. And the rest is just the typical, hey, we don't know what to do, let's just throw some spikes on him and call it a day. Not especially creative, and it loses a lot of its competitive viability since its speed actually decreases. It's still good, but definitely feels less versatile than regular Garchomp, aside from the fact that this one can act as a decent mixed attacker. And it's still double weak to ice, so this is one that I was never fully comfortable with using competitively. I would almost always opt for regular Garchomp in its place. Moving on to number 4 best, I'm putting Gyarados, because there is one thing that I especially love about this Mega Evolution, and that's that it's one of the few where it's not always an advantage to just Mega Evolve it right away. Water flying can be a more convenient typing in some scenarios, and sometimes you want to keep Intimidate to keep your opponent on the back foot. This Mega, I think, requires more strategery to use effectively than a lot of them. You have to sort of search for the right opening to use this Mega, but once you have it, you're gonna get a lot of mileage out of it. Honestly, I also love the Water Dark decision over the very cliche and expected Water Dragon. Charizard and Ampharos had already turned the dragons with their Megas, and while it would have been fitting, Dark is still very appropriate for Gyarados, and also gives him access to Stab Crunch, which is very nice. Also, I like that Mega Gyarados is one of the few Megas given to a Pokemon who was already really good that doesn't feel like it oversteps into being absurd. Yeah, you guys know who you are. Number 3 worst goes to Camerupt, and honestly, the only reason why it's this low on the list is because it was necessary. It had to happen so that Archie and Maxie both had their Aces Mega Evolve, but man, talk about a disappointment. Similar to Alakazam and Garchomp, I'll say it again, this boy is goofy looking. The slicked back, spiked hair, the circle of hair that looks more like a Roomba vacuum than a camel. Why does it have an M on its forehead? Did Team Magma pay for that product placement? It's a decent tank, but those 100 defenses are effectively 25 defenses when it gets hit by a water-type move, so it rarely ever succeeds at actually being a tank. Yes, it can hit hard, but with 20 speed and no access to recovery outside of rest, this thing just permanently feels like it's on a timer. It doesn't have the same oomph to it that so many other Megas have. Number 3 best goes to Manectric. I feel like this is as ideal as a Mega Evolution gets. It vaults Manectric from the bottom of the tier list to the top while not feeling especially broken like a Mega Mawile or Mega Kangaskhan. It feels like a very appropriate and measured buff that perfectly hits that middle ground, which is something that I feel like most Megas don't get right. On top of that, let's just say it, the design is absolutely sick. Having the bolts become the entire body feels like a natural upgrade to the design. It honestly, to me, looks more like a regular evolution than a Mega Evolution. It's not tacky, it's not over-designed, and this is very small, but the red claws just feel like such a good complement to the yellow and blue color palette. Intimidate gives this Pokemon a little extra bulk and utility, makes it a lot more interesting than just a one-dimensional glass cannon, and the ability also has great synergy with its speed and Volt Switch. Mega Manectric isn't exactly the type of Mega to go out and sweep an opponent's team, but it does tie a team together very nicely because of the utility it possesses. Number 2 on the worst list I have to give to Abomasnow. This just seems like the most forgettable Mega Evolution because it doesn't even try to do anything new. Same ability, same typing, even the design looks almost exactly the same as the original. It's just hunched over with a couple big weird spear things coming out of its back now. I don't even know what you'd call those. Maybe if the games had given Wolfric a Mega Abomasnow like they did in the anime, it would have been more memorable, but who am I kidding? It still would have just died to an ember. It pretty much has the exact same problems as Mega Camerupt, but hey, at least someone uses Mega Camerupt. You're kind of forced to remember it. Abomasnow, not so much. It's pretty much the epitome of uninspired. My pick for the second best Mega Evolution, this is where I know I go off the rails for some of you, but let me cook, Mega Slowbro. Now you've heard me say the whole video I'm not a big fan of the goofier Megas, but that only applies when it happens to Pokemon that are meant to be taken seriously. Slowbro is an inherently goofy Pokemon, and I actually appreciate that they turned the goofiness up to 11 on this dude. Kinda looks like Patrick Star in the Fry Cook games, if you know what I'm saying. The whole concept of the Mega Evolution energy actually went to the Shelder on its tail rather than Slowbro itself, causing it to be eaten alive. I love it. It's peak. Shell Armor isn't a super exciting ability, but given this thing's immense bulk, I love that you can set up with it with Calm Mind without fear of getting crit. It also has Slack Off, so it actually functions well as a tank, unlike Camerupt or Abomasnow. And honestly, one of my core memories of high school was some kid challenging me to a battle with a team of legendaries and mythicals, and I swept him with a Mega Slowbro, so since that day, he's kind of been my MVP. Not everyone can just do that. And so, without any further ado, my personal least favorite Mega Evolution, or Mega Evolutions. Yeah, I'm cheating on this one. It's definitely Mega Latias and Latios. For starters, these guys are easily the least memorable Megas from a design standpoint. These guys were basically the original G-Max Flapple and Appleton. Furthermore, not really much of a fan of these guys in both a competitive context or a main story context. Competitively, they just feel like slightly less versatile versions of the original Latias and Latios. Because despite the stat buffs, they essentially function the exact same, except they can't use an item. And in terms of the main story, I absolutely hate how they get implemented in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. You get access to them way too early, and if you want to use them, it kinda ruins the balance of the game for a fair chunk of it. Pretty much just another example of severe power creep in Pokemon. Yes, they do give us soaring later in the game, which is pretty much the only thing I can compliment them on, but also, they could have done this with virtually any flying Pokemon. They just had a good idea for a feature and decided to attach it to these guys. The concept of soaring itself is incredible, but realistically, it has very little to do with the actual Mega Latios or Latias themselves. And before I get to my best Mega Evolution, I do want to give an honorable mention to Mega Rayquaza, because design-wise, sure, it's over the top, but it's appropriately over the top. This is the granddaddy of all Megas, the Mr. Dragon Ball Z. I didn't watch the show, I don't know what the dragon is actually called, but yeah, he is him! But given what I said earlier about being fair in a competitive context, yeah, no, he's a war crime. And I would be a massive hypocrite to actually put him as the best. So yeah, just an honorable mention. Also, people will be like, wow, how did you go the whole video without mentioning Mega Rayquaza, you idiot? So there, you happy now? And for my personal favorite Mega Evolution, I will have to go with Mega Absol. Obviously, the design of this thing is an absolute banger. Being inspired by an angel or Lamassu, which are both protective spirits, it's super on brand for this Pokemon, and it's one of the few Mega Evolution designs that actually feels really inspired instead of just looking like a kid just colored on top of the original with spikes and crazy hair. Though, I guess he still does have that part. The stat upgrades are also very substantial without becoming absurdly broken, and Magic Bounce is a really cool ability to tack onto it. It actually allows Mega Absol to be both a sweeper and a pseudo-support Pokemon at the same time. They took a Pokemon who really didn't have a niche and somehow managed to make it work well in multiple roles, which I have to commend. The Absolite is also placed very well in Oras' story, being found at the Safari Zone, which is only a short distance away from where you'd normally catch Absol, so it's not one of those Megas that you would have to wait a really long time to get, but it's also not nearly as early or overpowering as Mega Latias or Latios. So there you have it, those are my personal best and worst Mega Evolutions. Sorry if I made you mad, I hope we can still be friends. Let me know your favorites in the comments down below. But don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.